don't block the path of inquiry. Don't lay down rules that make it impossible for people to ask important questions.
Welcome to the Thought Stretchers podcast, where we hope to stretch your thinking about important issues in education through rich inquiry. My name is Drew Perkins, and I'm your host for these conversations for complexity and nuance. In this episode, I spoke with Jackie Castillo-Blaber and Melinda Karshner. Jackie is a parent of a dyslexic child, as is Melinda, but Melinda is also a fourth grade teacher and teacher of reading. I first heard of Jackie's story thanks to Kareem Weaver, who is with Fulcrum, which is an Oakland-based nonprofit committed to fighting for literacy. Kareem joined me on the podcast in May of 2023, which is episode 337, Ensuring the Right to Read, where we talked about the documentary titled Right to Read. What we talked about in this episode is the complications and complexities of teaching reading and how phonics, while really, really important, is not enough, and that we want to really think about how we approach the teaching of reading in ways that don't create the pendulum swings that we often see in education. It's pretty excruciating hearing these parents talk about the struggles that their children go through and the responses, not to villainize teachers, as you'll hear, but it is really hard to hear, and for that reason alone deserves our critical attention. Like Kareem, Melinda has been on the podcast before, and you'll hear us reference a piece which has been republished on our site from her site, which is titled Phonics Will Fix It, a Myth I Wish Were Still True. We will link to all of those things in the show notes if you want to click through and find those resources. A few other housekeeping notes. As always, I encourage you to check out our website, which is wegrowteachers.com. There you'll find all of our information on professional development and professional learning, including on literacy instruction. And I'm excited to announce that we are now offering a free download of a 178-page, 9-section guide to project-based learning. This free PDF download is for those of you who are interested in project-based learning and is a curated and organized collection of blog writings from our website. If you're interested in that, you can go again to wegrowteachers.com and you'll find it either on the blogs on the right side as a widget or in the project-based learning workshops section. And also, for those of you interested in project-based learning, early bird registration just has a few weeks left for our PBL Grow 25 conference in Louisville, Kentucky. That'll be June 23rd through 25th, and you can find information on that at wegrowteachers.com on the top of the website. As always, feel free to reach out to me at drew@thoughtstretchers.org with any comments, questions, concerns, or ideas. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Jackie and Melinda. I am here with Jackie Castillo-Blaber and Melinda Karshner. Melinda has been on the podcast before, and we have a blog piece that she has written and graciously allowed us to republish that we'll probably refer to, but Jackie has a story. Both of them have a story about reading and reading instruction and dyslexia, so we're going to unpack those and see where that conversation goes. But I want to give each of you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Jackie, we'll start with you. Kind of give us a little background on who you are and maybe some of your story as we kind of unpack it, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I am a parent from Niagara Falls in New York. I have two children. I have an 8-year-old. She's dyslexic. She's in 3rd grade. She has dysgraphia too. And I have a 5-year-old who is high support needs autistic, non-speaking. And I guess parenthood has been a lot of like a boot camp in special education in understanding interventions. And I think I've just tried to rise to the occasion as much as possible to help ensure I'm meeting my kids' needs as much as possible so they can be as independent as possible. In my kids being identified, right, through special ed and everything, getting diagnoses, I've founded a special education PTA that I'm a president of for my district to help other parents navigate the system because it can be pretty complex. I'm currently on a FACT parent panel with National Student Support Accelerator for high impact tutoring. A big thing that I would like to do living in my city is just address a lot of the issues that we have. We're kind of a service desert. We're a small city, and a small city school district. And we don't really have access that you would think we would have being an urban city to a lot of services. And that includes like tutoring, certified reading instructors. My son is autistic. I have to drive him to the next county for his autism school every day. My daughter gets her dyslexia intervention from a certified instructor in the next county. He needs private speech services in the next county. And so I'm just trying to find as many ways as possible to bring my district into, effective instruction and curriculums to help kids, because not every parent can travel like that. But also to give the parents here access to reading interventions and everything, because our literacy rates are so low here. Like, I think right now, what is our most recent NAEP, 78% of our kids are below proficient reading. So, and that's just like the average. So it gets worse when you go by the subgroup.
And how old are your kids?
My daughter is 8 and my son is 5.
Okay. Well, there's, I'm sure, lots more to tell of your story, but we'll get into that. Melinda, you want to say hello and maybe give a little refresher on who you are?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Melinda Karshner. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for 20 years now, mostly in 4th grade. I also taught middle school for a while. Middle school, I did science, math, and robotics, but I think my main passion has always been reading. I went to college originally for engineering, and then I think learned about the statistics with reading and reading proficiency rates in America, and to the dismay of my rocket scientist father, switched into teaching, which I'm happy about. I'm very passionate about it. I think throughout my career, I've been known as the teacher that helps change kids' lives. I've been known as a master at teaching kids with dyslexia. And I think when I had my daughter, who I realized was dyslexic when she was in preschool and couldn't rhyme and couldn't make sound letter connections, and knowing the genetic predisposition, was pretty sure she was dyslexic. I think even with my training, I'm Morton Gillingham certified. I've been successfully teaching for a very long time. I don't think I was prepared, even as a parent, for what a hard journey it is parenting a child with dyslexia, even with all the tools I have as a teacher. And then I think I've been really lucky in my career and in the school I'm at now, which is the school that my daughter's at, where the science-based approach to learning and teaching reading has always been in place in every school I've been in. So I think I've been so incredibly lucky, and my daughter has been so incredibly lucky. And what I found is it's still very, very hard, which has made me even more passionate. I'm currently on my district's dyslexia advisory committee. I think there's a really strong parent advocacy group here in Colorado and in Boulder, where I'm at, because I think it wasn't always a strong approach. And I think there's been a strong shift since I've moved here, and especially in the last couple of years. So my daughter's now in 4th grade, and I have a son who's 4. And his favorite thing to do, and I'm not joking, is like in car rides, like, how do you spell this word? So it's been very interesting seeing the difference in interest in wanting to read and spell. And I'm assuming he's not dyslexic, because he'll wake up and be like, let's play this game. What letter does lizard start with? The L. And then he'll try to spell, and then he'll ask me, which is horrifying because I'm little dyslexic, like the other day we were driving to Costco, can you spell this word? Like, I can, but could we play any other game? Anyway, so it's just been fascinating. 2 kids, very different went to the same preschool, and watching their journey and watching their journeys unfold. And it will be interesting to see how my son approaches, and I'm assuming embraces reading in a much different way than my daughter has. Yeah.
Okay. So, and one of the things that, Jackie, I think you are going to talk about is the instruction that I assume maybe both of your kids received, but you can clarify that, reading recovery. And just for full disclosure, Melinda is not particularly familiar with reading recovery, so she can certainly provide some of that color to or add some color to that story as well. But maybe, yeah, tell us, Jackie, a bit more about what that instruction looked like and some of the challenges and difficulties that you and was it both children that are, I'm sorry if I missed this, that are
No,
dyslexic?
no, my son's autistic, high
Okay.
support needs. Yeah,
Okay.
sure. So my son goes to a therapeutic school, so he has a completely different setting where they're working on a lot of like skills to be able to, attend and be in a classroom and everything. So his instruction is not as heavy in literacy, but hopefully he will come to the district eventually and get that science-based type of instruction, right? But the environment in my district right now, it's very much balanced literacy, and it's influenced by, in New York State, we have these cooperative boards that provide regions, especially like small districts and rural areas, like teacher training and stuff like that. They're like these centers where like a lot of that stuff comes out of, right? And from that is an actual reading recovery training site. So Ohio State University has it in their university, and then they go out to districts and everything, and they have these sites there available for districts to use. My district is one of the ones that uses it. And my daughter received 20 weeks of reading recovery in first grade. When she was in kindergarten, kindergarten, it was around COVID. So I was doing some, home instruction while I'm working from home, and you could definitely tell. I thought, maybe I'm just not great at teaching reading or something. Teaching is hard work. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm not as, bright as I thought I was. Let me get her into school. So as soon as they had vaccines available, I sent her and everything. And she started, and she would be sent out of class all the time for being distracted, couldn't follow along during alphabet time, letters and things like that. It just wasn't coming. And even though we had done at home, like ABC Mouse, IXL, stuff like that, like standard like homeschooling stuff, it wasn't clicking. And we read at home all the time. And so by first grade, they said, okay, we're going to put her in this intense intervention, right? A tier 3 intervention, reading recovery. So I said, okay, let's get her reading. I want my child to read. And so what it is it's 5 days a week, 30 minutes, one-on-one. At the time, my son, he was in early intervention for autism, and one-on-one instruction is like gold standard, right, in special education. So I said, that's amazing. One-on-one instruction. Let's do it. I'm committed. There's a whole portion where the child will come home with these level texts, and you're going to read it with them every night. And we're going to cut up these sentences. The teacher will give it like cut up, and then they're going to glue the sentences, the whole words together to understand a sentence, but whole words. You're going to read with them all the time. And then they're going to draw a picture of, the sentence and everything. So it's this whole component where parents are engaged and involved. I think that's great. So it's 5 days a week. And I would say within 5 weeks, you could tell my daughter's like affect changed. She was no longer this kid that was excited to read. The light kind of went out in her. She didn't want to read books anymore, didn't want to look at any of the books at the library that we had taken out. Starting to shake when reading. You could just see like a lot of anxiety coming up. And you're reading the books with them, and it just, a lot of it's like they're leveled books that are really dependent on, like, the picture tells the story. It's a lot of what they say, like 3Qing. We're going to look at the picture for context. We're cutting up whole words for sentences. We're not really focusing on like sounding it out, but like as a parent, I'm working with her. I'm like, okay, sound it out. And things weren't coming intuitively to her. And as a parent, I didn't know it was dyslexia or anything like that. Let's see, then what happened? Oh, so she's getting that. I requested a meeting, with the intervention. Well, actually, no, let me back it up. So there's some online instruction during this time. I believe it was because, it was a snow day or something, a couple snow days. So the kids are working remote, and I'm observing her, I'm working from home, and I'm helping her out. And I'm able to sit in on some of her reading recovery sessions with the tutor. And I'm seeing what the tutor is getting frustrated with. They're saying, she's being silly. She's not paying attention. She's intentionally forgetting words after they've just been taught. A lot of red flags that you would know were dyslexia, right? If you were an interventionist, I would think. And I watched this kid read. I'm right next to her. She's reading, looking at pictures, guessing, so much guessing. And she's not really being redirected to look at the word, look at the letters, talk about the sounds and everything. I don't even know how to explain it, but like, it's nothing like you would think how you were taught as a kid in reading. And I watched her be frustrated. I watched her teacher be frustrated with her. And really the only feedback I got was like, you need to help her pay more attention. She's not paying attention. She needs more grit. She needs more perseverance, which I think it's like, I'm so tired of hearing it about my kid because she's working really hard all the time. And so I called this meeting and I said, she's not making progress. It's really affecting her at homework time. Like, she's shaking. And these are just like little worksheets from school, that she's doing. It shouldn't be making her shake. So I called the meeting and I said, we need a different intervention. This isn't working. And they said, well, we usually do the standard. We always do the 20 weeks. And that bothered me. And I said, okay, well, what about evaluating her for special education, right? I'm somebody who had already been through early intervention with my son. And so to me, I think for a lot of parents, special education evaluations, they see it as a label and they're very afraid of it. But with my son, I see it as access to services. And so I'm not afraid of a label. I just wanted my daughter to get the help she needed. So again, they were like, I guess you could do it. So like, I had to figure out how to do that. And, I took care of child find myself, I guess. And I did the referral, and, you have to wait, 30 days and everything, and you get your meeting. But in the meantime, they had her do the full 20 weeks of it. It just kept escalating, like crying all the time in class, in the hallways, breaking down in classes that were totally unrelated to reading, art class. Like, I just watched my kid be kind of traumatized by school. And it started with that intervention. I had to pay out of pocket for an advocate. And so I could ask the right things to get her the testing she needed. And we demanded they give us the composite score, for risk of dyslexia. And, she ended up with the identification of specific learning disability in reading and writing. And we really tried to get her an Orton Gillingham style intervention with somebody who was certified. And that wasn't what we were offered. We were offered, training from somebody who had taken like a, like an online self-paced course, the most basic one. Somebody who I don't even know was a reading interventionist that had no practicum, was going to do it after school some days. And I said, that's not really good enough. Like, it's not going to get her where she needs to be at grade level. So I filed what I needed to do for like independent educational evaluation, got on a waiting list, and I was able to get a full diagnosis of dyslexia, dysgraphia, coverage from the district to pay for an intervention that she currently attends with somebody who's certified in an Orton Gillingham style intervention. She's approved for 5 days a week right now, but it's not feasible to drive out all the way to the next county 5 days a week with all the driving we're doing for her brother. So she goes 2 days a week. We're seeing progress, but it's stalled because of the rest of the curriculum, her tier 1 instruction every day in school. It's some science of reading. She gets foundations. And then they differentiate for the rest of the ELA block with, they do some wonders, but they do the small group work with literacy footprints. And that is by, it's like another level text sort of guided reading by 2 reading recovery teachers. So I think the thing I started to notice is that if you have this intervention and this training site in your district, it's kind of its own ecosystem. And with it comes other practices that are related to it that are rooted in balanced literacy. And so you're going to have level text in the room and stuff like that. And it ends up being this patchwork literacy block where kids are getting some science of reading. And we check a box. Yes, we're following science of reading for this, but it's not connected to the other work they're doing throughout the day. And it's really just stalling her progress. And you're still going to see behaviors from kids because they're just not getting to grade level, and it makes the day harder. And it's like we're driving out there and she's doing all this hard work and we're not getting the return that's needed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And there's certainly some questions I have, but I'm going to ask Melinda. I'm curious a couple things. I'm sure you probably have some questions and some thoughts and some responses and some wonders, but I'm also curious because your daughter, you weren't in reading recovery, or she wasn't. So does that I'm sure a lot of that doesn't sound familiar, but it's probably some of it sounds a little familiar.
And I think one of the things that was very familiar to me, and I'm going to start by saying I am the biggest phonics proponent out there. I love phonics. And in the sense of dyslexia, like when you were talking about the social emotional aspects and the impact of not being able to read, that all sounded very similar. The high anxiety, there was a lot. I'm going to back up a little bit and explain the situation. So also, like, kindergarten for my daughter she started kindergarten and COVID was online, or school rather was online. So the first, I think my district had kindergarten specifically, knowing how crucial a year it is, go back the end of September. So we started August. So she was online August and September, basically. And I work with her teachers and also could see her teachers online now, and was on maternity leave at that time. And so could see her kindergarten teacher very expertly engaging a kindergarten class online, and doing phonics, explicit, direct instruction, everything that you would want in phonics, whole group instruction. And my daughter, it was very hard for her. She started to, at a point, slam her computer shut every time it was phonics time because it would not click. And I was kind of surprised by that because, again, like seeing and knowing, I think I had the advantage of knowing the early signs of dyslexia. Not being able to rhyme as a young child was a big one. And then again, she could give you the precise location to a place she went to one time. She could tell you at age 3, all of the planets in order, exactly where the asteroid belt was, but B says what? She'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand. But like on all other levels, and is such a bright kid. And sometimes we'd be like, does she have a photographic memory? But not when it comes to letters and sounds. Absolutely not. So knowing that, like before, when COVID, everything shut down, I would do these big chalk obstacle courses with letters and sounds, and we would hop and we would do the letters and the sounds, and we would spell CVC words, which are like cat, consonant, vowel, consonant. And I was like, wow, great job. I'm like already starting Orton Gillingham stuff with her. I was really patting myself on the back, like, all right, we're ready for kindergarten. And then kindergarten started, and it was very hard for her. And phonics especially was very hard for her. And I think I was very taken aback because of all the prep work that I did, because of knowing her Montessori preschool was so great with all of that early learning and everything that science is to do. And I can see that with my son, who's at the same preschool, same teachers. So I was really taken aback with how hard it was and how frustrating it was for her. And then in first grade, it was, again, like very high anxiety, especially right before the dreaded iReady test. I can't tell you how many days getting her into a car to go to school was hard because her stomach hurt. She has headaches. The amount of time she would go to the nurse, and I would get a call, and I work at school. Yeah, going to the nurse, your daughter's here. She says she has a stomach ache. And then the conversation would be like, okay, look at the time. I think this is the reading block. Does she have a fever? No, she doesn't. Please send her back to class. And so that was a really big deal. The stomach aches, the anxiety, the absolute, I don't want to use the word hate, but the sudden shift from, like, as a baby, I have pictures of her surrounded by books, loving books, absorbing books. In kindergarten, she could, you would read it. She would say, can you read this to me? She would memorize the book, read it back to you. So we were like, oh, look at her go. And then first grade, you can't fake it anymore. Even though she was getting all of that direct instruction, all of the phonics from kindergarten, first grade, her teacher, is dyslexic. He was like, I'm kind of seeing the things. And I'm like, I'm seeing them too. Okay. So he started doing small group work in Gillingham with her. And it's still all of that deep anxiety because it was so hard. And I think especially some other things come so easy for her. And, kids compare themselves to peers. And she's so aware of that. And she's seeing this is not that hard for her friends, and it's deeply hard for her. And so all of that anxiety and not wanting to go to school and going to the nurse because my stomach hurts, that was all there. And it's hard. That part was really, really hard. I think part of what I love about the dyslexia advisory committee with my district that I'm on right now is we're talking about this emotional piece. And I think even when all the right things are in place, all the phonics is in place, the work in Gillingham is in place, that properly trained teachers are in place, it's easier. And I'm so thankful. I'm so grateful she's had all that. And it's still hard. And that emotional piece is still huge and is still a piece that I think we as educators need to be more aware of. Again, even me as a teacher who really strongly believed I'm going to know exactly what to do. I'm trained in all the things. I've dealt with this. I've successfully helped fourth graders. When it was my own daughter, I was like, I don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do? And I remember, like, her interventionist was like, Melinda, like, you literally know what to do. You've been trained, you know what to do. And her teachers know what to do. And I know what to do. And I'm still like, this is terrifying. It's so scary. And you want to help and you want to fix it. And it's so not an easy fix. And you just want it to be. And I think that has been the hardest part for me. And again, I'm so thankful that she's had phonics. But even, like, I know you mentioned with reading recovery, sending home the leveled readers, we would get decodables. She would crumble them up in her backpack. She would hide them because it was hard. And I think what I love about decodables, and I think what made it easier for her, she's working on this phonics skill and then applying it to the decodable. And I could always tell, like, even when she was tested in second grade, just because I wanted to get the diagnosis. And I, like my husband, like, in case we move, because I know what it's like in other schools, and I need her to have this diagnosis just in case. And I'm so thankful that we were able to afford that because it had to be outside and it is very pricey. And I've lost my train of thought.
Well, one of the things that that I think both of you have identified and that I'm picking up on, even though it's not the strongest suit of mine, is the empathy, right? And Melinda and I were talking a few days ago, thinking about like having this conversation, and I'm very fortunate in that I have two daughters, and neither of them have dyslexia or any major learning kinds of issues. But I do have a friend, a very good friend of mine. I was telling the story, who is, my age now, so in his 50s, and to this day he's dyslexic, and to this day he still struggles with that. And his mother was an esteemed educator in our area, but was just hammering him and basically saying, that Jackie, that kind of thing about grit, right? Like you're just not trying hard enough. You're just not working
Mhm.
hard enough. And to this day, he still refers to himself jokingly, sort of half seriously, his word. And some people may not like to hear this word, but he will call himself a retard. And, so that sort of self-image, right, of how that plays out throughout somebody's life. So I'm curious about the empathy piece. And again, I'm not looking to cast villains, but it's easy to think about reading recovery teachers as villains. And I'm curious, what kind of response did you feel like it was empathetic? Did you feel like it was responsive? And how did that feel?
That's a good question. Her reading recovery teacher, very sweet woman, very nice. I think teachers are great. I think anybody that would sit and commit one-on-one to work with a kid, like I commend it. I think people go into teaching to do the right things and to help with good intentions. And I think to a certain extent, teachers are stuck with the curriculums and interventions that the districts choose, right? But in my conversation in, I want to say 2023 with my district, I sat and I met with somebody from curriculum and instruction. And I said, okay, well, here's the problem. Like you gave my kid 20 weeks of one-on-one, like the power of high impact tutoring, right? You kind of rewired things and now I have to unwire it. And it's making everything much more difficult in her intervention. And they just said, like, dyslexia instruction happens outside of school. That's not something that happens in school. And I go, it's not exactly a free and appropriate public education, is it? And I go, okay, why? Because there's like a district policy to not have anybody trained in dyslexia. So I don't blame the teachers so much because there's an intentionality from that conversation that I gather to, I don't know, what's the term? Plausible deniability. If I'm not trained on it, then I didn't do anything wrong. But, and so like, I don't blame the teachers. I think I've heard enough people have been trained in reading recovery that like, there are some good things that come from it. But it's just not producing results. And reading recovery itself says, I believe, well, no, this is what I was told by curriculum instruction is that let me back up. I sat in on a behind the glass session. That's what they call it, behind the glass, where you go to the training site and the reading recovery teachers. One of the really great things about the program, I think, that districts love is the teacher mentorship. And so it's not like you just get a box of an intervention here, figure it out, teacher. They give you all this like training and support and mentorship all the time. They're meeting, looking at data and things like that. To help the kids. So I think that's very appealing. So I went to one of those for her reading recovery teacher. And I said, can I sit in? Because I'm getting my master's in special education right now to help fill the gaps for my son, to help get him more independent. And I was like, can I just sit in? I'd like to see an early intervention. You're very involved with a lot of the help that your kid's getting. So that was very normal. So I sat in on the session and I'm watching the instructor work with her in person. And the professional, the site trainer is behind this two-way glass, like mirror. And I'm watching my daughter make up words, look at pictures. Like I'm watching the 3 cueing fall apart. And so the instructor comes out to coach the teacher, and the instructor didn't know how to help my daughter. And I'm like, what's going on that nobody knows how to help this kid? It hit home again. This is not the appropriate intervention for her. They did a little bit of work on a dry erase or a big magnetic board with some, like the little letter magnets you'd have on a refrigerator, spelling a word, but nothing really direct, explicit, tying writing and sounds. I think writing is the biggest piece to getting stuff for dyslexics. It's the sound stuff, all the phonics and stuff. It's almost like you're spinning your wheels until you get that explicit handwriting instruction, letter formation to tie it. It's like not making the connections for them. She wasn't getting that. I think the teachers are very nice. I don't see them as villains. I see the reading recovery model and the profit model as harmful. I see powerful people who act powerless, as harmful. I wouldn't say villains, although sometimes it feels that way. I hear from my district that, it's the teachers union. They made the decision on the curriculum and interventions. I hear from the teachers union, the curriculum and instruction picks it. There's nothing we can do. Talk to curriculum instruction. And then it gets like, oh, the board. And then the board says, well, it's your poverty and parenting. If the parents just read to their kids more, and I go, I have done everything possible to read to my kid and expose her to books. I've done so many different community programs and things like that. Like I've been a model of an involved parent with reading, and it doesn't work. And so why are we picking things that aren't producing results? That's where I guess the villain, but it's more like we're playing hot potato with accountability, and it's harmful. That's how I see it. It's harm, and let's not do harm to kids.
Melinda, you're shaking your head, and if I'm reading your body language, you might have some things to say.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. And I think a big problem in education right now is just pointing fingers. And I think in my experience as a teacher, like when you mentioned the profit model, I think a lot of it kind of goes back to there's this urge to want to fix it really quickly. And then to fix it really quickly, we buy a program, and the program has made these really big promises. And often I think we're finding now that sometimes the big promises were made on research that isn't particularly valid. And I think the root of a lot of problems that we're seeing in education is that big, hefty promises. Everybody wants a quick fix. Teachers want a quick fix. I think everybody that gets into education, like you said, gets into it for the right reason. Parents want a quick fix. And then we have these programs promising really big promises that they can't always follow through with because it's very complex. And I think especially dyslexia is a very complex disorder. It's very hard to quote unquote fix. I think there's so many nuances and moving pieces with it. I'm so sorry that your child, I'm going to pause and say, I'm so sorry that your child was told they're not, and then you were told that your child's not working hard. I think I've never met a child that works harder than a child with dyslexia.
Thank you.
And there's never in my life, I think every child I've had as a student or any student in my class, that you don't see kids work harder than kids with dyslexia. They work so hard. And I think too many parents and too many kids are told that it's like, why aren't you working hard enough? And they are working hard enough. And I think that causes so much damage as well.
I literally got an email yesterday from the teacher that my daughter shutting down at a new and difficult concept was laziness and defiance. Like it's when you were talking about tolerance and like just empathy, like it really like understanding and stuff. We need more of it for these kids with like specific learning disabilities. Like, do you know what I mean? It's hard. It's really hard.
So much. And I think teachers need so much more training, not in just approach. How can we help support these students, but also how can we help support them emotionally, and how can we understand, like, kids don't walk into your classroom wanting to be defiant. Kids don't walk into your classroom wanting to purposely not do what you're telling them to. Like, I think kids come into kindergarten so excited to learn and they want to learn. And when it's hard, it's a human response is to shut down. I mean, my human response still, like, I will never play golf because it's hard. And I'm like, well, it's hard. I'm not going to do it. Like, luckily, golf is not something totally crucial to my life, but that's like a totally natural response. And I think teachers maybe need more support and more training with when a kid is shutting down, when a kid is not doing their work, they're not being lazy, they're not being defiant, there's something there that they need more support with. So what are some different methods that we can use to help get them away from, probably honestly, that fear of, this subject's really hard for me and I don't want to fail. It's easier for me to just put my head down. It's easier for me to put my pencil down. How can we help support teachers to conquer that? Because I think that's step one, that let's get the kid out of this fear mode so they are open to accessing the material. And then, of course, like, let's give teachers the appropriate materials and the appropriate training that they need, because at the end of the day, like, when it's me and 30 kids, if the materials I have in my hand aren't what they need, there's only so much I as one person can do. So yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces, but I think that emotional piece is so huge. I just wish more teachers and more administration and more superintendents were more aware of how difficult learning disabilities are and how difficult dyslexia is and how hard these kids are trying. And it should never be said your kid is lazy. It should never be said your kid is being defiant when it comes to they're sitting in this subject, getting these materials that are very difficult for them. They're not just being defiant, and they're absolutely not being lazy. And I think more training needs to be there to address how to solve that problem, in addition to the curriculum and the instruction being delivered and what to do when. Yeah, it's a very nuanced and complicated approach. And I wish that we wouldn't just throw money at a new curriculum every 5 years, hoping that it's solved.
Well, it brings to my mind the question of teacher autonomy. And Melinda and I are both on social media and seeing we've got pretty strong messages of this is the right way to teach, that's the right way to teach. And to be clear, and again, Melinda's not saying phonics isn't important, but it doesn't solve everything, right? It's still hard for dyslexic kids. And there are other things that are important, there are learning challenges and things that I think fit this bill, but maybe dyslexia being one of the most challenging. And so when I hear about teachers who are sort of in reading recovery and in that program, and, again, not to villainize them, but it sort of seems like if one is in a school like your daughter, Jackie, and the union and everybody says this is the way we teach, should the teachers have the autonomy to step out of that and say, I'm going to try some different things? And alternatively, Melinda's at a school that sounds like they're not reading recovery and, really stressing phonics, but phonics it's not the only thing. There's other things. So I think it's a really challenging question is to say, well, how much autonomy should teachers have to sort of step outside of some of those prescribed, this is the way that teachers are supposed to teach. And I'm curious, Jackie, as a PTA, you said you started the special education PTA. How do you think about that? And then Melinda can talk about it and get herself in trouble with her school district.
Well, I mean, we're pretty new, so we're not pushing the bill on a lot of things. We're not like that too difficult. With our PTA.
I mean, you would have wanted. I was going to say,
I've heard this a lot.
Yeah, you would have wanted your daughter's teachers to try some different things, right?
Yeah, and especially coming from like a special education lens, right? It's individualized instruction, and I think I want teachers, I think it can be very dysregulating for teachers when they're not given the training and high quality materials that they need to do their job. I don't think it feels good to not be good at something, right? And like something that you've dedicated your career to. And so like, I think I want to honor autonomy and the art of teaching that we hear a lot about, but for me, as somebody who's like in a program right now for special education, I see it more as craftsmanship. Art is like subjective, right? And it's like, it could mean anything to anybody, right? Craftsmanship. I don't know that I'm seeing craftsmanship all the time. And that, I think that comes with a lot of really strong training and stuff like that. I know that there's, teachers there, shut the door and do what's right. But what that does for a parent in a school that's Title I, and I'm a minority parent, so that depends a lot on the goodwill of the teacher lottery, right? Like, who is my kid going to get that year? And she might get a very lovely teacher that sees a lot of competence in her and has a lot of patience and empathy for who she is and how she comes and presents herself. She might get somebody else who doesn't have the tolerance for it and doesn't have the empathy and doesn't believe that in any type of inclusion, and wants your kid to go to another school, where special ed kids go. So, I mean, yes, teacher autonomy. I just wish it was more like craftsmanship that comes from a lot of strong training, practicums and things like that are really rooted in like evidence-based. I think teachers are owed that. They're owed strong training. It's not right to send them there. But I don't know. I think that teachers should also, like, sometimes when they sit there and they say, well, there's nothing we can do. You have a union. I, as a parent, don't have a union. So I go to every school board meeting and I do the advocacy needed to hopefully push the needle on things. And I don't know that I see, it's almost like a learned helplessness where we say like, there's nothing I can do to change things. I'm not seeing it happening. It's just like, well, it is the way it is. And we're always going to be the bottom district in our county. I don't know. Yeah.
Melinda, you want to get yourself in trouble?
Always. I love your reframe of craftsmanship as opposed to the art of teaching. I think I use the art of teaching a lot, but I think reflecting on everything you just said probably mean more the craftsmanship. And I think, I know one of the things I hope to advocate more for is attracting and retaining high quality teachers that understand how to craft lessons, and how to meet the needs of varying students in their classroom. Is I think that's so important. And I think one thing that we're losing a lot of traction on is attracting and especially retaining the teachers that know how to do that, and the teachers that did receive all of the proper training. I think I was very lucky. I got my master's degree right out of college when I decided to be a teacher, and from UCI, and they were already teaching the rope, Scarborough's rope, and they were already doing all the things that we're now talking about again. And so I was in this blissful bubble where I just thought, and they were talking about like recueing is a thing of the past. This was 2003. It's a thing of the past. Let's all laugh at that. Never going to see it again. I lived in this weird bubble until, I don't know, 2016, where I just thought like, is that not how everybody teaches? Because that's how I was taught. That's how I started with open court reading, which was very explicit, phonics based, moved to another district in California that had a lot of teacher autonomy, a lot of choice, still had a program that we could choose from, but we could apply our craft to what we were doing. But I mean, they paid more than the other districts, and they were able to really pick and choose what teachers they wanted in that district. And the district is very successful. They have an 85% proficiency rate. And I think some of that comes from the population, but it is LA. There's still a 21% when I was there, free reduced lunch. And really successful district, but they supported their teachers. So there was that, I think there's this balance that's needed where you have a truly high quality curriculum and truly high quality interventions, and knowing that there is no perfect curriculum. You can't make a curriculum that's going to meet the need of every kid. That's just not how humans are made. So I think there's that balance of we need to get our best chance with something that's truly high quality, and then let teachers adapt to what their students need. Because we shouldn't be playing the did my kid win the teacher lottery game. And I think too many parents really are. So that high quality material thing needs to be in place, and teachers need to be able to adapt when needed. I don't think I've ever done the same thing with every class. Every class has such a different specific need. Like this class that I have this year, there's a lot of really quirky spelling things that I don't understand. And maybe it's because of COVID, but I'm like, okay, so I have to really switch and move away from what the curriculum is doing, because it's not, their spelling program isn't really even touching the needs of the kids. My kids need a lot more vocabulary instruction than they need. So I need to be able to adapt. And I am given the freedom to do that. Yeah, and we have Into Reading right now, and I think that's a very controversial program. And I think with any program, if you are approaching it as these are a set of materials, and at the end of the day, I need to do what my kids need, the kids in front of me, I think you can adapt any program to meet the needs of a student, some harder than others. But I think it all boils down to, again, teachers need high quality materials, and then there needs to be an understanding that there's no perfect curriculum, but our chances at getting kids to proficiency are highest when we respect teachers, we attract and retain talent, and we give them the highest quality materials that are out there.
Yeah, well, we're on the right track with all of those things. I'm certain of it. Sarcasm font, right? So as both of you are talking, I'm thinking about some of the conversations I've had, and one of those was the quote unquote reading wars panel that I had. It's been several years ago now. Emily Hanford, of course, Natalie Wexler, who both of you I'm sure are familiar with. Mickey Ray was part of that, and I think Kate Wynn, who some of you or both of you might be familiar with, but Mickey Ray is the chief academic officer here in Kentucky, and she's really working hard with her team to try to shift, because Kentucky is generally a reading recovery kind of state. And so changing some of those mindsets, right? So how do you change those mindsets from for teachers who, some of them, I mean, I think certainly are sort of dug in, and we have, this sort of us versus them tribalism kind of dynamic happening. But Jackie, I'm wondering if you've seen any success. I think I asked Kareem, who he gave me an interesting answer. Actually referred to a district in Kentucky, but one of the things that he mentioned was just going to see, like, where does it work? And I think Mickey's trying to do some of that. But what kinds of things have you seen, if indeed you've seen, had some success in sort of shifting that needle?
So I'm a member of another community group in my city that's, trying to focus on the literacy piece. And Dr. Tina Schultz, the CEO of our of Niagara Community Information Group, she went on a tour of a district in Delaware, Seaford, Delaware. It's a school district there that's very similar demographics and sort of income situation that you would see in my district. And I think they use bookworms. But she was able to see firsthand a tour of a district that, similar problems, that adopted, science of reading, or whatever we want to call it, evidence-based practices. And they really turned it around, and they were the same situation. They're bottom of their rankings, and I think they brought it up to be top. And I think what it showed was, yes, our kids are capable of more. And I think we forgot that here. I think, what was the initial question? Just
trying,
how did we get buy-in, right?
Yeah, I mean, have you seen anything that has worked in either personally in
Yeah,
your
so we brought that story back and we tried to present it, and it wasn't received well by our school board. It's kind of defensive, and we're a good school district, and if your kid's not doing well here, it's because of you. Sort of like, literally, that's what they said to my husband. If it was good enough for my kid, if it's not good enough for yours, then it's you. So it's very difficult. I think the problem in my district, so New York State right now is doing this whole Back to Basics initiative where they're trying to, the governor is having every district in New York State certify that the curriculum and instruction is in every school district is aligned with the science of reading by September 2025. There's no list of what you cannot use or anything like that. It's just very open. Here are some literacy briefs, understand what the science of reading is, and then you self-certify district. And I think it's really hard for districts like mine to do that. They've already said, okay, we align, which they don't. But they're going to say they are. And it's hard for them to do that when they rely on BOCES for training, right? This BOCES, this Board of Cooperative Education, that gives training. And it's literally the site for reading recovery to have the teacher training site. And every teacher that's been trained through it is now sitting on a curriculum board, that chooses the curriculum in the district. That's in the shared decision-making model that we have, that we say that we have for the state. They're in it. So like, it would almost be like it would be like saying, if they were to say, no, this doesn't align, then they have to shutter the doors of that training site. So it's like, it's a conflict of interest. And I think we can't really get a neutral, like a review of, hey, do we align, do we not, without removing that bias. And so I don't know. I think it will take our state just not having those exist, like not banning it, but just saying you can't operate business here. We're not going to lease this to you. You can do it elsewhere because you're a standing business organization. Do you know what I mean? That's the only way I can see neutrality, maybe.
Well, I do know what you mean, because I think we've got the almost exact, if not exact same dynamic. I think here in Kentucky, there's a provider that is, sort of tied in with the reading recovery. I don't remember the exact details, but as you were talking about it, it sounds almost exactly the same. And of course, if they're making money and this is their model, then trying to find evidence that their model doesn't work is probably not in their best interest, right? I mean, it's similar to, in some ways, to teachers' unions, right? And teachers' unions have a certain purpose, but they also sometimes have, let's say, not so great effects, the downstream effects, because they are trying to their constituency is the teachers, not necessarily the students. And so it does sometimes cause that conflict. But on the other side, and I think Melinda can speak to this, is we always see these pendulum swings, right? And so now we see, I think Emily Hanford's podcast is great, and certainly think her work has been really important in shifting the conversation. But do we have the danger of, and I think that it's obviously true, that we see this like shift towards, well, phonics, and phonics will fix it, right? Which is a myth that Melinda says, boy, I wish this was true. So, how do we keep from getting into that situation where it's just phonics and there's nothing else, and we're not considering anything else? So I don't know, Melinda, if you have any thoughts you want to add there.
Yeah, I think part of the problem that we're seeing, and I think part of the problem with like the adoption process and what a lot of people are calling it an overcorrection because there's too much phonics, is we don't have clear guidelines. So it is really easy, like you mentioned, to just like check off boxes like, I have phonics, therefore I'm doing the science of reading correctly. And then, which is a big problem because then it won't work. And then what my fear when all of this started rolling was, if we don't do this right and it doesn't work, risk swinging back to no phonics, and we need phonics. So we can't do this overcorrection where I know I've heard in some districts, like they went from no phonics to foundations to then they adopted a program, and now we're doing foundations and the other phonics one. So kids are getting like over 40 minutes of phonics, which isn't science-based, but also there's not enough research or enough advice on like prescribed amount of times for things. And I think that's also when we get into trouble, where districts can say, but we are doing the science of reading, and then go on and do an hour-long block of this independent reading time where kids are doing too much independent stuff and they're not getting that direct instruction. So there's not this like acknowledgement that of course kids need time to apply all of the skills they're learning independently. But when you leave an hour and a half, or I don't know how long some districts are doing it, of 10, 8, 9, 10-year-olds having free reign, and the teacher is with one small group and the rest of the class is doing something independently, again, the human nature, kid nature, they're not going to be on task that whole time every single day. And I think a lot of things get lost there as well. And again, it goes back to, it's easy to, and I think when we look at ed reports, there's a lot of people like questioning how some programs got all greens. And then a program like Bookworms, which by the way is like my dream program. My district could have adopted Bookworms. I think Bookworms is as close to perfect as you can get, in my opinion.
And it's affordable too.
And it's affordable. And I haven't used it, so I shouldn't say that because I haven't really used it. But every time I look at it, I'm like, this is, if I were to write a curriculum, it would be Bookworms. Anyway, I think, like ed reports, it's very easy to, again, just like check. Yes, I'm including these things that need to be in a science-based curriculum, but are you really including them? And what does that really look like is where things are getting lost and where it's easy for, I think, things to go astray. And then when things go too astray, we have another swing. And we need to, there's this like middle ground that we all need to find. But I think there's just a lot lost in translation right now.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
It seems to be the case across the board. So not to cast you as an expert, Melinda, but you do have some experience and some expertise. So when you're thinking about what has worked and hasn't solved all the problems with your daughter, she's dyslexic, and as you mentioned, like it's still hard, but what have you seen that has worked and has really helped her?
Yeah, I think, again, like she's been very lucky. She's had very high quality teachers her whole entire career, which has been huge. She's had teachers that really understand dyslexia her whole entire career. She's had Orton Gillingham as like 30 minutes a day since first grade. That has been huge. And then I think there's those like and pieces where I think maybe what's being lost in some of what's happening right now is that overcorrection to like direct instruction. Kids also need a reason to want to read. And I think because balanced literacy in so many areas was done so poorly, that quote vibe-based teaching has been like, oh, if we give kids a book, is that too vibe-based? But kids also need a book. So I think like when things really started clicking for her this year, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on the name of the book, out of my mind. She was in a small group, still like we're so lucky this year. We have three paras that help us run small groups. So we're able to run our independent work time where kids really only have like 20 minutes of independent work time. And the rest of the time they're with an adult doing something, which is huge. And unfortunately, I think the funding probably is going to go away. But when I saw the biggest shift for her from this is hard, I don't like it, and now like she goes to bed with a book, which is so huge. When I was at the last dyslexia meeting, started crying a little bit. Like, I'm so sorry that I'm tearing up, but this is so huge. Like, she's going to bed with a book. Like, that's huge. And that happened after her teacher had her in a small reading group, reading the novel Out of My Mind. And she'd come home so excited about that book. So it was this, like, all those other things are important. The phonics, so crucial. The direct instruction of the skill-based comprehension, so important. Also, sometimes that can be a little boring. And then there's that, like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. I think kids need that too. And I'm hoping, and I think what I love about Bookworm so much is that it really incorporates everything, and that kids need to be excited about this. That's undeniable. And I think that's why the districts that are using Bookworms are seeing so much success. It's so engaging. And it kind of covers all of those pieces, including that, like, how do you get the student buy-in? So yeah, I think I answered that.
Well, so as a follow-up, because you mentioned the comprehension piece and, of course, the science of learning, direct instruction, science of reading folks, and it makes sense to me, talk about how important knowledge is and background knowledge in that comprehension piece, and getting away from the teaching of reading comprehension as a sort of isolated skill. I'm curious how you've seen that.
Well, I think this is where I could get short. I think with the swing into, like, what people call basal readers, where I found in my career the most success as a teacher is when you can pull in, with knowledge building, pull in the cross-curricular units, so that you're not, and I think elementary school has such an advantage in having the whole day, so that you're not just teaching science in isolation. You're not just teaching social studies in isolation. You're able to, like, during the reading block, during parts, read, like, now we're going to approach this as a scientist. We're going to read this piece as a scientist. Now we're going to do the reading of social studies. So you're doing all of that knowledge building and reading and really maximizing your time, so that later in the day you can do the work of a scientist with experiments and do the work of a social scientist or a historian, by really analyzing, like, primary sources and everything. And even though some people are opposed to that, so I think that knowledge building is so important. And I think you can really maximize on that in the reading block by pulling in those science and social studies standards, which again, I think is where I'm wary about some of the knowledge building programs that are out there, because time is so precious and kids really need to do the reading of science and the reading of social studies. And when a reading curriculum is taking 2 hours of the day and focusing on, like, my reading curriculum has a lot about Florida in it, and I need to be reading about Colorado. So my students are reading about Colorado. So it gets tricky, because again, time is precious. So I think that knowledge building can be so maximized in an elementary school when you're pulling in the science and the social studies standards.
Yeah, well, I just recorded yesterday a podcast with 3 researchers, and one of the things they're talking about is the importance of curriculum being coherent. There's a coherence of that curriculum, and I think that's kind of what you're getting at. And Jackie, I know we're getting ready to wrap up, I think, but any questions that you might have, or comments based on what Melinda just said, and then anything that we haven't talked about that you want to definitely share?
No, I mean, I just wanted to clarify. I think there's like this messaging that science of reading is just phonics, and that does. I don't believe it's true. Being in science of reading spheres, that's actually accurate, but I do think decision makers in districts interpret it that way. Yeah. And so I do think if they continue on that path, we're going to see the pendulum swing again, because we're going to call it quits and we never implemented it properly. But I totally agree with you. It's such a difference. I think that Bookworms program, they have a great differentiation block. I think that really studying special ed and how to differentiate it meets kids' needs. And I love that they incorporate, like, actual text, like the whole text. I think that's so important for kids to be exposed to. I feel like that's how we all learned, right? I love that idea. But yeah, I agree with everything you said, Melinda. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what you just said about that differentiating, I think the people understanding the science of reading and the teachers understanding the science of reading understand it's way beyond phonics and it's the whole rope, et cetera, et cetera. My fear, same, is that the people that are implementing and the people that are making decisions and these state legislators are just kind of boiling it down to phonics. And that's when you see the just the phonics patch, and that's where it won't work. And that makes me very scared.
Yeah, same.
Well, we can end on that scary note. And yeah, it is always frustrating because it's just everything in politics and education. It just gets boiled down to very crude kinds of things. And yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Jackie, anything else you want to share? Any links, any places folks should go? You want them to visit, that kind of thing?
No. Should I have one? I mean, if you wanted to reach me, nf.septa, septa @gmail.com. If anybody really wants to send me some dyslexia materials out in the world, that would be great for my district. So.
Okay. Melinda, you have anything you want to share before we sign off?
No, I have a website that I'm not good at keeping up with. I'm on Twitter every once in a while, but probably should stop being on Twitter. I have an Instagram account that is laughable. Eduventuring. I don't know where I came up with that, but it's stuck.
Yeah. Well, thank you, both of you, for joining in the conversation. As I always say, I hope it's helpful. And I think the reflectiveness of conversations, we just have to do more and more of these, and hopefully, it will help us continue to make headway in a way that's productive and not unproductive, that we're both, or all three of us, are scared of. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
This was lovely. Thank you.
What we need to do is spend enough time together that we can start to translate our ideas into each other's language and include one another in this community of inquiry. And that is the work of love.